He walked into a boutique in downtown Atlanta on a Tuesday afternoon, looking for nothing in particular. What he found was a dress in the window that stopped him cold. It was made of silk that caught the light like water, with embroidery that looked like a map, Seoul's skyline woven together with Atlanta's streets. And when the designer came out to ask if he needed help, he recognized her eyes before he recognized her face. 10 years. One dress. And suddenly, everything he'd been waiting for made sense. This is the story of how a boy learned to create beauty by watching a girl who saw the world through fabric and color. How 10 years of waiting became 10 years of creating. And how sometimes the person you're waiting for is creating something just for the day you come back. Before we tell you how a dress became the most important thing in both their lives, I want to know. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Atlanta? Seoul? Somewhere else? Because this story belongs to everyone who's ever created something and left a piece of their heart in it. Now let's go back. Back to a Seoul international school. Back to a girl who didn't know her art would become a bridge. Back to where everything began. The Seoul International School art room was a sanctuary for the lonely. It was a large space with tall windows that faced the city, filled with easels and pottery wheels and long tables covered in sketching materials. During lunch hour, when most students huddled in the cafeteria in their established groups, the art room became a refuge for those who didn't quite fit. The kids who preferred creating to socializing. The dreamers who saw the world in colors and shapes instead of words and schedules. Imani Carter had found the art room on her third day at Seoul International, when the cafeteria felt too big and too bright and too full of eyes that didn't know what to make of her. She was 13 years old, with dark skin that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, box braids pulled back in a high ponytail, and a notebook filled with sketches of clothes instead of buildings. Most kids her age drew people or landscapes or abstract designs. Imani drew dresses. She drew them in every style she could imagine. Traditional hanbok-inspired pieces with modern cuts. Designs that mixed African textiles with American silhouettes. Clothes that told stories. Clothes that said, "This person exists. This person matters. See them." On this particular day, she was sitting at a table by the window, sketching a dress that had been living in her imagination for weeks. It was a fusion piece, the structured beauty of Korean traditional dress, meeting the freedom of contemporary design. The top was inspired by a jeogori, the short jacket of hanbok, but reimagined in modern proportions. The skirt was full and flowing like a chima, but with a contemporary line that made it feel current instead of historical. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the boy watching her. Joon Seo was 13 years old, with a face that seemed carved from something harder than other boys his age. His uniform was perfectly pressed. His tie was exactly aligned. His hair was neatly combed. Everything about him suggested a life where chaos was not permitted, where every moment was scheduled and monitored, and designed to produce a specific outcome. He was supposed to be studying in the library during lunch, but he'd discovered, quite by accident, that the art room was usually empty. And something about being in a room full of creative potential, even if he wasn't creating anything himself, made the knot in his chest loosen just slightly. He stood in the doorway watching Imani sketch. She had her tongue poking out just slightly, concentrating, her pencil moving with absolute certainty across the page. She wasn't tentative about her vision. She wasn't second-guessing herself. She was creating like she knew in her bones what she was meant to create. Joon had never seen anyone draw like that. He stepped into the room. Imani looked up, startled. Her eyes, dark and warm and intelligent, assessed him for a moment. Then she smiled. "You're that guy," she said. "The one who's always alone in the cafeteria doing homework." "You're the new girl," Joon replied. "The one who's always alone in the art room sketching." "So we're both alone," Imani said matter-of-factly, returning her attention to her sketch. "Might as well be alone together." Joon pulled out a chair and sat down. Not across from her, but beside her, at an angle where he could see both her face and her drawing. "What are you creating?" he asked. "A dress," Imani said. "For a girl who doesn't exist yet. Or maybe she does exist somewhere, and she's just waiting for me to finish drawing her so she knows what she's supposed to look like." Joon was quiet, processing this. In his world, you didn't create things that didn't serve a purpose. You didn't make things for imaginary girls. You made things that generated profit or advanced your family's position or impressed people who mattered. Imani's way of thinking was so foreign to him that it felt like looking at a language he'd never studied. "Show me," he said. For the next hour, Imani drew while Joon watched. She drew the dress from different angles. She drew variations on the design. She explained her thinking. How the geometry structure could work with contemporary fabric. How the chima silhouette could be modernized without losing its grace. She drew with the certainty of someone who'd been dreaming about clothes since she was old enough to hold a pencil. When she finally set the pencil down, she looked at him with those warm eyes and asked, "Why are you really here? In the art room? You don't seem like an art guy." Joon was quiet for a moment. He'd never been asked why he did things. He did things because he was expected to, because his family required it, because there was no alternative. "I needed to not be perfect for 1 hour," he finally said. "In this room I can just be, without anyone expecting me to be CEO material or a good investment or the future of the family. I can just sit here and exist." Imani nodded like she understood completely. "That's the whole reason I draw," she said. "The clothes don't care if I'm black or American or the only girl in Seoul who dresses like she's from Atlanta. The clothes just are. They exist because I made them exist. That's powerful, you know?" From that day forward, Imani and Joon became the regulars in the art room. Not because they were creating art together, but because being in that space together made them both feel less alone. She sketched while he sat with business textbooks he didn't need to read, and somehow his presence made her work feel less like a hobby and more like a calling. He watched her create, and for the first time in his life, Joon understood that there were people who built things just because they had to, just because their souls wouldn't let them be still. Imani was one of those people, and being around her made him wonder if he could be one too. 2 years of afternoon art room sessions transformed both of them. Imani's sketches became more sophisticated. She wasn't just drawing pretty dresses anymore. She was creating a vision of fashion that honored multiple cultures simultaneously. Her designs began to show sophistication that most 13-year-olds couldn't access. She was thinking about textiles, about how fabric moved, about the philosophy of clothing. Joon remained outwardly the same. Perfect student, perfect heir, perfect future CEO. But inside something had shifted. He still did his business studies and his piano lessons and his etiquette training. But in the art room with Imani, he let himself imagine a different life. A life where he wasn't performing all the time. A life where he could just exist. It was during their second year of friendship that Joon made a decision that would shape the next decade of his life. He went to his grandmother's house on a Sunday morning, something he rarely did, as visits to his grandmother were formal affairs full of lectures about legacy and responsibility. But he had a specific purpose. "Grandmother," he said, standing in her traditional Korean room with its low furniture and carefully arranged antiques, "I need to ask you about something from your collection." His grandmother, Park Hae-won, was a formidable woman in her 70s. She'd been a businesswoman in her own right before marrying into the Park family, and she ruled her household with the precision of someone who'd built empires. "What is it?" she asked, setting down her tea. "The sewing needle case," Joon said. "The antique one. With the embroidered cover. The one that belonged to your mother." His grandmother's expression shifted. The needle case was precious, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. It was a symbol of the women in their family who'd created, who'd stitched, who'd made things with their hands. "Why do you ask?" his grandmother said carefully. "I need to give it to someone," Joon said. "Someone who creates. Someone who sees beauty in the world the way you taught me beauty should be seen. I need her to have it." His grandmother studied him for a long moment. She was sharp enough to understand that this wasn't casual, that this was important. "Is this a girl?" she asked. Joon nodded. "A suitable girl?" Joon didn't answer that. Suitable meant many things in his world, and by most measures Imani Carter, an American transfer student, black, artistic, completely unmeasurable by business standards, would not be considered suitable. But his grandmother surprised him. She rose slowly and walked to an antique cabinet. From it, she withdrew a small box covered in blue silk. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a sewing needle case that was absolutely exquisite. The cover was embroidered with thread work depicting flowers and vines, and the inside was lined with the softest fabric imaginable. The needles inside were arranged by size, each one a work of craftsmanship. "My mother gave this to me when I was 15, his grandmother said. "She told me it was for the things I would create in my life. Not just clothes, she meant everything. Businesses, relationships, a legacy. Everything we create with intention and care. Like sewing a needle through fabric. When you give this to this girl, you give her permission to create. You tell her that her hands matter. That what she makes matters." She handed the case to Joon, and it felt heavier than its weight. "The one who receives this will be important," his grandmother said. "Make sure she knows that." It was autumn when Imani's father told her they were leaving Seoul. The news came quietly, over dinner, delivered like it had already been decided, and they were all just going through the motions of acceptance. "The project is finishing ahead of schedule," David Carter explained. "My company needs me back in Atlanta. It's a good opportunity, a promotion, and it means we need to go home." Home. Atlanta. The place Imani had felt homesick for every single day of the past 2 years, but the place she now didn't want to leave. She told Joon the next day, in their art room sanctuary. He went very still when she said it. Like he'd been expecting this moment but had built a wall around it in his mind, and now the wall was crumbling. "When?" he asked. 2 months, Imani said quietly. "Dad wants to give me time to say goodbye to people." Joon was quiet for a very long time. Then he asked, "Have you thought about what you're going to do? After high school?" "Georgia Tech," Imani said without hesitation. "I want to study sustainable fashion. Create designs that matter. Build a brand that respects both the environment and the people who make the clothes." "You're going to be extraordinary," Joon said, and he meant it with every cell in his body. "I know," Imani replied simply, "but I don't want to be extraordinary without you knowing it." That night, Joon did something he'd never done before. He broke curfew. He snuck out of his house at sunset and made his way to Han River Park, to the bench where he and Imani sometimes sat, watching the water reflect the dying light. She was already there, waiting for him. It was autumn in Seoul, and the air had that particular sharpness that made you want to hold on to summer, even though you knew it was already gone. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, and the water was the color of pewter. Everything felt temporary. Everything felt precious. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Joon pulled out the small blue silk box. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said. "And before that, to her mother. It's a sewing needle case. And I'm giving it to you because you're going to create beautiful things. Important things. Things that matter." Imani opened the box with trembling hands. The needles gleamed in the fading light. The embroidery was intricate and careful and spoke of generations of women who'd stitched their dreams into fabric. "Joon," she whispered. "This is too much. This is a family heirloom." "Exactly," he said. "That's why you need to have it. Because you're going to create a legacy. Your own legacy. A legacy of beautiful things." He pulled out a small card that he'd written that morning, tucked inside the box. On it, he'd written in his careful English, "For hands that create. For the girl who taught me that beauty isn't about perfection. It's about intention." Imani cried then, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "I don't want to leave you," she said. "I know," Joon replied. "But you have to. Your dreams are bigger than Seoul. You need to go to Atlanta and study, and become the designer you're meant to be." "What about us?" Imani asked, and she sounded so small and so young. Joon took a breath and made a decision that would define the next 10 years of his life. "Listen to me," he said, taking both her hands. "I'm going to make you a promise. Not because I expect you to wait around or put your life on hold, but because I need you to know that what we have is worth something. That I see you. That I recognize something in you that matters." He looked directly into her eyes. "I'm going to become someone strong enough to choose my own life," he said. "Someone powerful enough that my family can't control me. Someone who builds things with intention the way you do. And when I'm that person, I'm going to find you again. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know what the world will look like. But I'm going to come back for you. I promise." Imani was crying openly now. "That could take years," she said. "I know," Joon replied. "But I'll wait. However long it takes." You can't promise that. You're 13. Then I'm 13 and I'm making the most important promise of my life, Joon said. You taught me that things worth having are worth waiting for. You taught me that creation matters. You taught me that I don't have to be perfect, I just have to be real. So I'm promising you, I will find you again. Imani pulled him close and held him like she could stop time with the force of her grip. They sat there until the sun disappeared completely, until the river turned black and the lights of Seoul reflected off the water like fallen stars. And when Joon finally walked her home, neither of them spoke. There were no words big enough for what they were feeling. At her door he said, "Keep creating. Keep designing beautiful things. That's how I'll find you. By following the trail of beautiful things you create." She nodded, not trusting her voice. The last day of school before Imani's family left Seoul, she wore a dress she'd designed herself. It was a small thing, really, a fusion piece that combined the best of everything she'd learned in Seoul. The structure was clean and modern. The fabric was beautiful silk she'd chosen carefully. And embroidered along the hem, in the smallest stitches, was the skyline of Seoul. Joon saw her in the hallway and stopped walking. "You made that," he said. "Last night," she confirmed. "I wanted to wear Seoul one more time before I left." That evening, Imani's family hosted a small goodbye dinner. Her father's colleagues came. Her mother's friends came. The house was full of people saying goodbye and wishing them well. But the most important goodbye happened in the evening, when Joon showed up at the door with flowers in his hands. Imani's father let him in without question. He understood somehow that this boy was important. They sat on the front steps of her house, in the cooling evening air, and didn't say much. They held hands. They looked at the street where they'd walked together so many times. They breathed the same air one more time and tried to memorize it. "I'm going to carry that needle case with me forever," Imani said quietly. "And I'm going to carry the memory of watching you create," Joon replied. "Every time I feel weak, I'm going to remember you sketching in that art room like your life depended on it. Like the world needed your designs. And I'm going to keep building myself into someone worthy of finding you again." "Don't do it for me," Imani said suddenly. "Do it for you. Build yourself into someone strong because you deserve to be strong. Not because you're waiting for me." Joon was quiet for a moment, and then he understood what she was really saying. She wasn't asking him to move on. She was asking him to live fully while he waited. To become great, not for the reward of seeing her again, but for the sake of becoming great. "Okay," he said. "I promise." The next morning, Joon's mother drove him to the airport. He told her he had to say goodbye to a friend. Imani's family was checking in for their flight when he found them. Imani was wearing a simple white dress and the needle case on a chain around her neck, visible for anyone to see. When she saw him, she ran. They crashed together like two people trying to stop the world from turning. "Don't forget me," she whispered into his shoulder. "Never," he promised. "I'll never forget you." The security line called. Imani's parents were waiting. Her little sister was already heading toward the checkpoint. Imani pulled back and looked at him one more time, memorizing him the way he was memorizing her. "I love you," she said, and it sounded impossible and true all at once. "Even though we're young. Even though everyone says this won't last. I love you." "I love you too," Joon said. "And I will find you again. I promise." He kissed her one last time and then he let her go. He watched her walk toward security, watched her turn back 3 times. The first time she waved. The second time she touched the needle case on her chest. The third time she just looked at him, burning his image into her memory the way he was burning hers. And then she disappeared. Joon Seo walked out of Incheon International Airport with his heart in pieces. His mother was waiting in the car, asking if he was all right, and he couldn't answer. How could he explain that he'd just watched his entire world board a plane to America? But something shifted in him that day. Standing in that airport, watching the plane carry away the only person who'd ever made him feel real, Joon made a decision. He was going to spend the next 10 years becoming someone strong enough to never lose control of his own life again. He was going to build an empire. He was going to become so powerful that no one could ever separate him from the person he loved. He didn't know if she would wait. He didn't know if teenage promises meant anything in the real world. But he knew with absolute certainty that he had to try. The first year after Imani left, Joon threw himself into his studies with an intensity that worried even his demanding father. He attended Seoul International for his final year of high school, then moved into Seoul National University's most competitive program. He was no longer the quiet heir who hid in the art room. He was a force. He was focused. Every single moment was channeled toward one goal: becoming undeniable. At night, alone in his dorm room, he would pull out a photograph of Imani that had been taken in the art room, laughing at something Joon had said. He'd look at her face and whisper, "I'm keeping my promise. I'm becoming someone worthy of finding you again." The sewing needle case she'd left behind. Yes, she'd left it with him, asking him to keep it safe, sat on his desk like a talisman. When he felt weak, he would touch it and remember her hand sketching with absolute certainty. Her vision of a world made beautiful by intention. At 19, Joon entered Seoul National University's business program. He was younger than most of his classmates and infinitely more focused. While they attended parties, he studied. While they dated, he remained single. While they built social lives, Joon built intellectual foundations. His professors noticed. Business leaders noticed. By 22, he was being recruited by multiple companies. By 23, he was completing an MBA while simultaneously working as an analyst at a major investment firm. By 25, when his father's health began to fail and the board of Park Industries needed a new CEO, Joon was ready. Not just ready, inevitable. The youngest CEO in the company's 50-year history, the heir who had transformed himself into a force of nature. He moved into the executive suite of the Park Industries building. He stood at the window on the 47th floor and looked out at Seoul. Somewhere in the world Imani was creating. Somewhere she was sketching designs and building a business and living the life she was meant to live. And he was going to find her. Imani arrived back in Atlanta at 14 years old with her sewing needle case, and a heart full of promises she wasn't sure she'd be able to keep. High school was different from Seoul International. She was back in an American school where she wasn't the only black girl anymore, where her art was valued, where she could breathe. But she carried Seoul with her in every sketch. Every dress she designed had echoes of geoggery structures and chima silhouettes. Every piece of fabric seemed to whisper about a boy with serious eyes who believed in her before she fully believed in herself. She sketched constantly. Fashion design classes became the highlight of her days. Teachers noted that Imani Carter had vision beyond her years. They encouraged her to enter design competitions. They told her she had a real future in fashion. At 16, she won a local design competition with a collection that blended African textile patterns with contemporary silhouettes. The judges' comments were glowing. Mature vision, cultural respect, technical skill beyond her age. Her father, watching her accept the award, understood that his daughter was building something real. At 18, Imani was accepted to Georgia Tech's fashion program, exactly as she promised Joon she would be. She packed carefully for university, including the photograph Joon had given her. The one of them both in the art room, caught mid-laugh by a friend who'd snapped a candid shot. In university, she was serious about her studies in a way that sometimes made her seem older than her peers. While other students experimented with trends, Imani was studying sustainable textile production. While they focused on fast fashion, she was learning about ethical manufacturing. She was building a philosophy of design that honored both the environment and the people who created clothes. At 21, while other students were partying, Imani was interning at sustainable fashion brands. She was learning everything she could about running a business. She was building a vision of what she wanted to create. At 23, Imani opened Threads of Home. It was tiny. A small boutique in downtown Atlanta, barely profitable at first. She worked 60-hour weeks, designing pieces and managing the business and trying to get press attention for what she was doing. By 24, Threads of Home had been featured in a local Atlanta magazine. Emerging designer creates fusion fashion with soul. By 25, Imani Carter was becoming someone in the Atlanta fashion world. Not famous yet, but respected, recognized. Someone people were watching. Every dress she designed had traces of soul in it. Every collection had architectural lines inspired by Korean beauty. Every piece carried a message. I remember. I'm still creating. I'm still keeping my promise. 10 years passed. In Seoul, a boy built an empire. In Atlanta, A girl built an art form. Neither of them knew where the other was. Neither of them had any way to contact the other. But in the quiet moments of their lives, they both carried the same memory, the same promise, the same belief that some people don't give up on you, no matter how much time passes. Imani would sketch a design and realize it looked like the bridges of Seoul. Joon would sit in a business meeting and remember the way she'd moved her hands when she was drawing, like she was sculpting the world itself. They were building toward each other without knowing it. Two people on two continents, creating beautiful things while holding on to a promise made in the art room of a school neither of them would ever return to. There was one physical object that connected them during those 10 years, though neither of them knew about it. When Joon was 13, his father had given him an expensive watch. It was a Rolex, a symbol of the Park family's status and wealth, the kind of watch you wear to board meetings and important events. It was meant to be formal and impressive and completely unfeeling. Joon hated it. On one of his final days with Imani in Seoul, sitting in the art room, he'd mentioned how much the watch felt like a shackle, how it represented everything he didn't want to be, obsessed with status, with time, with markers of wealth instead of markers of meaning. Imani had smiled and asked, "Can I do something with it?" She'd taken the watch to a jeweler she knew, someone who worked with her family, and had the back carefully engraved. On the inside of the case, where only the wearer would ever see it, she'd had him inscribe 2 words. Choose freely. When Joon put the watch back on after she'd returned it, he saw the engraving and understood what she was really telling him. Not to wait for her, but to live fully. To choose his own life, not the one his family had designed. And in choosing freely, he might find his way back to her. For 10 years, Joon Seo wore that watch every single day. In business meetings, in formal events, in private moments in his office. And every time he looked at it, every time his wrist caught the light just right and he caught a glimpse of those 2 words, he was reminded of her. Choose freely. That watch was the reason he became CEO. Because the moment he had the power to choose, he could choose to find her. Joon Seo sat in the boardroom of Park Industries on a Tuesday morning in late 2024, a full decade after Imani left Seoul. "We need international expansion," he announced to the board. "Specifically, I want to establish operations in the United States. Atlanta, Georgia." The board members exchanged glances. It was ambitious. It was risky. It made business sense on paper, but it felt personal in a way they couldn't quite articulate. "Atlanta is growing," Joon explained, his voice calm and businesslike. "It's becoming a major hub for creative industries, particularly sustainable fashion and ethical design. If we want to expand our real estate portfolio and establish cultural development projects, Atlanta is strategically sound." He was right, of course. Atlanta was exactly the right place. But only he knew the real reason. "I'll be overseeing the expansion personally," he continued. "I want to establish relationships with local businesses, understand the creative community, build partnerships that will set us up for long-term success." What he was really saying was, "I'm going to find her." 6 weeks later, Joon Seo was on a plane to Atlanta. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. His hotel was in Midtown, near the creative district where young designers and artists were building new businesses. He had meetings scheduled with real estate brokers and government officials, all legitimate business that needed to be done. But on Tuesday evening, after his meetings concluded, he decided to walk. He wandered through the streets of Atlanta, looking at the city through new eyes. This was where Imani was. This was her home. Somewhere in this city she was creating. He walked for hours, his expensive suit jacket slung over his arm, his tie loosened. He passed galleries and coffee shops and small boutiques. And then he turned a corner onto a quieter street, and he stopped. The boutique was small but beautiful. The windows were carefully styled, showing off pieces that were clearly thoughtful and intentional. The sign above the door read, "Threads of Home." Joon walked closer to the window, and then he stopped completely. There was a dress. It was made of deep blue silk that caught the light like water. The embroidery was intricate and careful. And as Joon looked closer, he realized what he was seeing. It was a map. Seoul's skyline on one side, Atlanta's streets on the other. The Han River flowing down the center, merging with Georgia's waterways like 2 worlds finally meeting. Joon stood frozen. It was impossible. It was perfect. It was heartbreaking because it meant she'd been thinking about him. She'd been creating with him in mind. She'd been holding on to the promise just like he had. He was reaching toward the window when the door to the boutique opened. A woman stepped out. She was beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. She'd grown up since he last saw her. She carried herself with confidence now, with the assurance of someone who'd built something real. Her clothes were one of her own designs, a fusion piece that spoke of both Seoul and Atlanta, and around her neck on a delicate gold chain hung something that gleamed in the afternoon light, the sewing needle case. She was still wearing it after all these years. "Hi," she said, noticing him staring at the window. "Can I help you with something?" Joon couldn't speak. He was trying to reconcile the girl he'd known with the woman standing in front of him. 10 years had passed and she was both exactly the same and completely transformed. Their eyes met, and in that moment Imani recognized him. "Oh my God," she whispered. Joon Seo stood on the sidewalk outside Threads of Home, and for the first time in 10 years, he felt like he could breathe. Imani stood in her boutique doorway, and for the first time in a decade, she understood that some promises are real, that some people actually do come back, that sometimes, the universe conspires to bring people together in the most beautiful and unexpected ways. Neither of them could speak. Neither of them could move. They just stood there on a Tuesday evening in Atlanta, under a sky that was turning golden, and tried to comprehend that 10 years of waiting had actually led somewhere, that it had actually meant something. "It's you," Imani finally managed. "How are you? What are you?" "I came to Atlanta for work," Joon said carefully, his English perfect but accented, unchanged from when they were kids. "Business expansion. And I was walking and I saw your boutique and I saw that dress and..." He gestured to the window. "The dress," Imani said, suddenly self-conscious. "I designed that last month. It's been sitting in the window. I wasn't sure if anyone would." "It's a map," Joon said, stepping closer. "Seoul and Atlanta." "Yes," Imani whispered. "I design like that sometimes. I combine places, cultures. I always..." She trailed off, realizing what she was admitting. She always designed with Seoul in mind. She always left pieces of him in her work. "You kept creating," Joon said, and there was wonder in his voice. "You became a designer. You built a business. You became..." Imani gestured vaguely at his suit, his bearing, his obvious success. "Whatever you are now. CEO? Business person? You look powerful." "I am," Joon said simply. "But I don't feel it right now. I feel like I'm 13 again. Sitting in the art room, watching you sketch and thinking that I'd never seen anything so beautiful as the way you create." Tears sprang into Imani's eyes. "I thought about you," she said quietly. "Every single day. I kept that needle case. I wore it. I still wear it. And I designed clothes and sometimes I would realize that they looked like Seoul. Like you. Like something I couldn't quite let go of." "I wore the watch you engraved," Joon replied. "Every day for 10 years. Every time I felt weak, I'd see those words, choose freely. And it reminded me that I was supposed to find you. That I was supposed to keep my promise." Imani reached out and touched his wrist. She pushed back his sleeve and there it was, the watch exactly as she remembered. She looked at the back and even though she couldn't see the engraving from this angle, she knew it was there. Her engraving. Her words. "I didn't think you would actually come back," she whispered. "I promised," Joon said. "I spent 10 years building myself into someone strong enough to keep that promise. I became a CEO. I built an empire. I did all of it so that I could be powerful enough to choose my own life. And when I could choose, I chose to find you." "But how did you?" Imani gestured at the boutique. "How did you know to come here? How did you find me?" "I didn't know," Joon said. "I just walked. I walked through Atlanta and I found you the way I always knew I would. By following the beautiful things you create. This dress found me. Or maybe I found it because it was made for me to find." Imani laughed, a sound that was both joy and disbelief. "You're crazy," she said. "Then I'm crazy," Joon replied, and for a moment they were teenagers again, speaking in that shorthand language that only people who've loved each other young can speak. "Do you want to come inside?" Imani asked. "See the rest of the collection?" See what I've been creating? Yes, Joon said. I want to see everything. Threads of Home was a small boutique, but it was a perfect reflection of Imani's vision. The front displayed finished pieces, dresses and separates and accessories that blended cultures and aesthetics with intention. Each piece had a story. Each piece spoke to her philosophy of fashion as a bridge between worlds. But it was the studio in the back, the space where Imani actually created, that made Joon stop moving. Sketches covered the walls. Hundreds of them. Thousands of hours of design work. Fabrics in every color and texture were organized on shelves. A large table was covered with works in progress, sketches for upcoming collections, and scattered throughout, woven into the designs, echoed in the structures, repeated in the architectural lines of the clothes, were signatures of Seoul. Han River references. Temple architecture reinterpreted through fabric. The structure of Hanbok reimagined in contemporary materials. She'd been designing him. Not consciously maybe, but emotionally. She'd been creating a conversation with the place he was from, the culture he came from, the boy he'd been. My God, Joon whispered, walking from sketch to sketch. This is extraordinary. It's just what I do, Imani said, but she was nervous. I create. I design. I try to tell stories through fabric and structure. These aren't just clothes, Joon said, turning to look at her. These are poetry. These are conversations. These are you saying something about your dreams and your heritage and your vision for the world. He stopped in front of a particular sketch. A dress with a complex structure that seemed to blend multiple design traditions simultaneously. Tell me about this one, he said. That's one I was working on when I heard you might be coming to Atlanta, Imani admitted. I didn't know it was you exactly, but my company was bidding on a major project with a Korean corporation, and I started researching Korean design, and I got inspired to create something that merged everything I love about Korean aesthetics with my own vision. Joon was quiet, processing the fact that she'd been thinking about him even before she knew he was coming. You never forgot me either, he said. Not for 1 second, Imani replied. They stood in that studio for hours. Joon asked questions about every design. Imani explained her process, her inspirations, her philosophy. And slowly they began to reconstruct the past 10 years. They shared stories of their lives, his rise to CEO, her building of Threads of Home. They talked about the hard moments and the victories. They talked about the times they'd almost called each other. The moments when they'd almost given up. And through it all, Joon understood something fundamental. She hadn't just waited for him. She'd built something real. She'd created a business and a brand and a vision that was completely her own. Finding him again wasn't the fulfillment of her dreams. It was the bonus on top of a life she'd already built for herself. That's when he fell in love with her all over again. Not the girl from Seoul, but the woman she'd become. Can I take you to dinner? Joon asked when they finally left the studio that evening. Not as business associates. Just as two people who knew each other a long time ago, and are trying to figure out what they know each other as now. Imani said yes. They went to a small restaurant in Atlanta that served fusion cuisine. A perfect metaphor for their story. Over dinner they talked. Joon told her about Seoul. About his family's pressure and his decision to use his power to live as he wanted. About the moment he decided to expand to Atlanta and why. Wait, Imani interrupted. You deliberately came to Atlanta because of me? Not because of you, Joon corrected gently. Atlanta is legitimately a great market for expansion. But yes, I chose to oversee the project personally because I needed to find out if you were here. I needed to know if you'd waited too, or if you'd moved on. I waited, Imani said quietly. Not in the way we promised. I didn't put my life on hold. I built my business and I dated a little and I lived. But part of my heart was always reserved. Always waiting. Always creating things that reference Seoul because I couldn't let you go. Joon reached across the table and took her hand. I have a confession, he said. The watch you engraved. I wore it every day. Every single day for 10 years. When I felt weak, when I wasn't sure I could keep going, I would look at those words, choose freely. And it would remind me why I was doing all of this. Imani looked at his wrist, where the watch was visible beneath his shirt cuff. I can't believe you still wear it, she said. I'll wear it forever, Joon replied. It's the most important thing I own. Over the next few weeks, Joon and Imani began the careful process of integrating their lives. During the day, he attended to business. He met with real estate brokers and government officials about Park Industries' Atlanta expansion. He worked with his team to identify properties and opportunities. But every evening, he came to Threads of Home. He would arrive after Imani closed the boutique, and they would go to her studio. He would watch her work. She would explain her design process, walking him through how she created collections, how she thought about fabric and structure, and the story each piece was meant to tell. "This one," she said one evening, showing him a dress she was designing, "is about how cultures are strongest when they're woven together. Look at the structure. It uses Korean design principles but Western fabric. It honors both without erasing either." "It's beautiful," Joon said. "Imani, your vision is so clear. So intentional. Did you always know you wanted to do this?" "No," Imani said. "I became clear about it because of you, actually. Watching you in Seoul, watching you struggle against a life that wasn't yours, watching you try to conform to expectations that didn't fit. It made me understand how important it was to build a life that was actually mine. A business that reflected my values. Clothes that told my story, not someone else's." Joon pulled her close, standing in the studio surrounded by her creations. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, "for everything you've built, for staying true to your vision, for not giving up on your dreams, even when I wasn't here." "I'm proud of you too," Imani replied, "for becoming someone strong enough to choose your own life, for keeping your promise, for being here." The day Imani met Joon's mother was a Wednesday afternoon. Joon had arranged for her to video call from Seoul, and Imani was terrified. She changed outfits 3 times. She cleaned her studio. She tried to figure out how to present herself as worthy of the promise Joon had kept for 10 years. When Seo Ji-yoon's face appeared on the screen, she looked directly at Imani and smiled. "So you're the girl," she said in careful English. "The one my son never forgot." "Yes, ma'am," Imani said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry for being a complication in his life. I know my family and I leaving must have been difficult for him." "Difficult?" Joon's mother laughed softly. "Child, my son has loved you for 10 years. He built an entire empire because of that love. He became the man he is because he needed to be strong enough to find you again. You weren't a complication. You were his direction." She leaned closer to the camera. "I want to thank you," she continued, "for making him feel real. For showing him that life could be more than business and duty and expectations. For being someone worth keeping a promise for." By the end of the conversation, Imani's eyes were wet with tears. Joon's mother had given her something she hadn't realized she needed. Permission to be part of his life. Assurance that she wasn't disrupting something important, but completing it. That same week, Imani introduced Joon to her father. David Carter met them for lunch at a restaurant near Threads of Home. He was protective and careful, asking Joon direct questions about his intentions, his business, his commitment to his daughter. Joon answered every question honestly. "My family is important to me," he said, "but not as important as choosing my own life. Imani matters to me. She always has. And I'm not here casually. I'm here because I made a promise 10 years ago, and I meant it." David Carter studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "That's the only answer I needed to hear," he said. "My daughter deserves someone who keeps his promises. Welcome to our family, Joon. If you're feeling the weight of these promises, the beauty of 2 people who waited for each other and actually found their way back together, you need to subscribe right now. Because what comes next, the moment Joon understands what Imani's business really means, the moment he realizes he wants to build something with her, not just for her. That's where this story gets even more magical. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single moment of this. 3 months after they reunited, Joon and Imani were having coffee in her studio when he said something that changed everything. "I want to invest in Threads of Home," he said. "Not as a business move, as a partner. I want to help you expand this vision globally." Imani looked at him carefully. "What do you mean exactly?" she asked. "Your designs are extraordinary," Joon said. "But they're confined to a small boutique in Atlanta. The world needs to see what you're creating. I have resources. I have connections. I have the ability to help you scale this business while keeping your vision intact. Let me do that. You already have a whole company to run, Imani said. Your expansion project. Your board responsibilities. I can't ask you to take on more. You're not asking, Joon pointed out. I'm offering. And Imani, I'm offering not because I love you, though I do. I'm offering because your work matters. Because you're creating something important and the world should see it. Imani was quiet for a long moment. On one condition, she said finally. This is my brand. My vision. I make the decisions. You don't get to come in and change things or scale things in ways that don't feel right to me. If we're doing this together, it has to be equal. My creativity, your business sense. But both of us steering. Joon smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way, he said. 50-50 partners. Equal say. What happened next was remarkable. Joon used his business expertise to help Imani formalize her operations. He connected her with sustainable fabric suppliers from Korea, Japan, and across Africa. He helped her understand global markets and distribution channels. He supported her in scaling production, while maintaining the quality and intention that made Threads of Home special. But more importantly, he became her creative partner in the business sense. When she was struggling with a decision about pricing or production or marketing, he would offer perspective. When she was unsure about expanding to online sales, he helped her build a strategy that felt authentic to her brand. And Imani in return began to influence his vision for the Atlanta expansion. These properties you're looking at, she said one evening, studying his development plans, they're all about commercial value. But what if you built something that honored the creative community? What if your expansion wasn't just about real estate and profit, but about creating spaces where artists and designers could work? Joon looked at the plans with new eyes. That's brilliant, he said. We could create a hub. Affordable studios for emerging designers. Retail spaces. A community center. A place where fashion and art and design could flourish. Exactly, Imani said. And Threads of Home could be one of the anchor tenants. We'd grow, but we'd also be part of something bigger. And that's exactly what they did. The Atlanta Creative Hub became Joon's signature expansion project. Instead of simple commercial real estate, it was a carefully designed space that honored artists and designers. It had studio spaces at below market rates. It had retail galleries. It had a community center for workshops and events. And in the most prominent location sat Threads of Home, a flagship boutique that represented Imani's vision to the world. A year after they reunited, Threads of Home was featured in Vogue. The article was titled, Imani Carter, the designer who bridges continents. Imani's phone rang for days after the article dropped. Boutiques wanted to stock her clothes. International retailers wanted to carry her line. Fashion industry people were reaching out wanting to collaborate, to invest, to be part of what she was building. She and Joon celebrated that evening in her studio, surrounded by the sketches and samples that had led to this moment. This is just the beginning, Joon said, holding her close. You're going to be one of the biggest names in fashion. I can feel it. We're building it together, Imani corrected. If you hadn't believed in me, if you hadn't helped me expand, this wouldn't be happening. I just gave you resources, Joon said. You gave yourself vision. You gave yourself talent. You gave yourself discipline and creativity and intention. I just made sure the world could see it. Imani pulled back and looked at him. I love you, she said. Not because of what you do or who you are in business, but because you see me. You've always seen me. From that first day in the art room, you understood that I had something to say through my clothes. And you've never stopped believing in that, even when you were on the other side of the world. Joon Seo and Imani Carter had spent 10 years building themselves into the people they were always meant to be. He became a powerful CEO. She became a visionary designer. And when they found each other again, they didn't stop building. They just started building together. The Atlanta Creative Hub became more than a real estate development. It became a symbol of what was possible when two people with different gifts decided to combine their strengths. It became a place where artists could thrive, where dreams could be built on solid ground, where creativity and business could exist in harmony. 2 years after reuniting, Joon brought Imani back to Seoul. They arrived in spring, when the cherry blossoms were falling like snow and the air was soft and forgiving. Joon had arranged everything carefully: hotel, meetings, introductions to his family. But first he took her to their places. They went to Seoul International School, which felt impossibly small and impossibly precious after so many years. They sat in the art room where Imani had first sketched that fusion dress, where Joon had first sat down beside her and asked about her creations. "I remember the way the light came through these windows," Imani said, standing at the tall windows. "I remember sketching while you did your homework, and I thought, this boy is going to be important to someone someday. He's going to change someone's life. I didn't know it was going to be mine. I remember thinking," Joon said, "that watching you create was more beautiful than any masterpiece I'd ever seen. That the way you moved, the certainty you had about your vision, that was art." They went to Han River Park, to the bench where they'd sat as children, where Joon had given her the sewing needle case and promised to find her again. The bench was smaller than Imani remembered. The river was the same. The light was the same. "I never forgot this place," she said. "I designed an entire collection inspired by this bench. The way the light reflected off the water. The way we felt sitting here." Joon took her hand. "I want to show you something," he said. He took her to a gallery in Gangnam that was displaying a special exhibition. The exhibition was titled, "Threads of Home: The Journey of a Designer." Inside were Imani's designs, pieces from her earliest sketches to her current collections. But interspersed throughout the gallery were photographs. Photographs of Imani in her studio. Photographs of the Atlanta Creative Hub. Photographs of her with Joon. Photographs telling their story. And at the very center of the gallery, on a white pedestal, was the dress with the map. The dress that had brought them back together. Imani walked through the exhibition in a daze, seeing her life reflected back at her through carefully curated space. At the end of the exhibition, Joon stopped her. "I have something for you," he said. He pulled out a small blue box, the same color as the silk of the map dress. "I couldn't give you a ring," he said. "Diamonds and gold felt like they didn't represent us. So instead I had something custom made." He opened the box. Inside was a bracelet made of white gold, delicate and beautiful. But what made Imani's breath catch was what was woven through the center of the bracelet. Silk thread in a pattern that matched the embroidery of the map dress. Seoul and Atlanta, woven together in precious metal and fabric. "Will you marry me?" Joon asked. "Not because of the promise. Not because of the 10 years of waiting. But because I want to spend the rest of my life with someone who creates beauty. Someone who bridges worlds. Someone who loves me the way you do." Imani said yes. Of course she said yes. If you're crying right now, you need to subscribe because the next part of this story is the wedding. It's the moment when two people who waited 10 years actually get to say forever. It's the moment when a promise made by teenagers finally becomes a marriage made by adults. Subscribe now to see how it all comes together. The wedding took place at the Atlanta Creative Hub, in the central courtyard space that Joon and Imani had designed together. The space was decorated with cherry blossoms flown in from Seoul and magnolias from Georgia. It was a perfect blend of their two worlds. The music was a fusion, traditional Korean instruments playing alongside American jazz. The food was Korean-American fusion, created by chefs who understood what they were really celebrating. Two cultures, two people, one promise that had survived a decade. Imani walked down the aisle in a dress she designed herself. It was a masterpiece, a wedding gown that honored both her heritage and Joon's. The structure was modern and clean, but elements of traditional hanbok styling were woven throughout. The embroidery on the hem was a tiny, intricate map of Seoul and Atlanta, visible only when she moved. When Joon saw her, his eyes filled with tears. At the altar, they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. "I promise to create a life with you that's as intentional as the clothes you design," Joon said. "A life where we honor both our cultures. A life where we build beautiful things together. A life where I never stop choosing you. The way I've chosen you every single day for the past 12 years. I promise to see you the way you've always seen me," Imani replied. "I promise to create with you. Not just clothes but a future. I promise to remember that you waited for me. But more importantly, I promise to live in a way that makes that waiting meaningful. Not because I owe you, but because you're worth building a life for." They exchanged rings, white gold bands with tiny embroidered silk threaded through them. And when they kissed as husband and wife, the entire courtyard erupted in applause. 5 years after their wedding, Imani and Joon stood in the Atlanta Creative Hub, watching their daughter play in a sunlit studio space. Their daughter Mina was 7 years old, with her mother's warm eyes and her father's serious expressions. She was sketching as Imani did, but she was also calculating measurements and thinking about structure the way Joon did. "Look, Appa," she called to Joon, holding up her drawing. "I'm designing a building that looks like one of Amma's dresses. See, the structure is like the silhouette of a geoggery, but the windows flow like a chima." Joon looked at the drawing, and his heart ached with the fullness of it all. "That's beautiful, Mina," he said. "You're creating bridges just like your mother." Imani came over and wrapped her arm around Joon's waist, watching their daughter sketch with absolute certainty. "She's doing what we do," Imani whispered. "She's building worlds." "Like her parents," Joon replied. They stood there, in their studio, surrounded by the evidence of their life together. Fashion sketches alongside architectural plans. Korean design principles merged with American innovation. A child who would grow up in two cultures, never having to choose one over the other, because her parents had spent their lives proving that bridges were possible. They didn't know it when they were 13 years old, sitting in the art room of Seoul International School. But Joon Seo and Imani Carter were building something that would last forever. He waited 10 years to find her. She created every single day, knowing that the universe was conspiring to bring them back together. And when they found each other again, not in a conference room or through corporate connections, but in a boutique window where a dress spoke their entire story in silk and embroidery, they understood something fundamental. The best promises are the ones we keep not because we have to, but because we can't imagine not keeping them. The best loves are the ones that survive distance and time and obstacles, and come back stronger, more real, more beautiful than they ever were. This is a story about creation, about two people who made beautiful things while waiting, and about what happens when you finally get to build your future with the person who was always meant to be part of it. 5 years after they reunited, Threads of Home released a special collection. It was titled Promise, and every single piece in it told a part of their story. There was the map dress, of course, the one that brought them together. There was a dress inspired by the sewing needle case, with intricate hand embroidery that took 3 seamstresses 3 months to complete. There was a design inspired by the watch, with a structure that flowed like time, like the passage of 10 years somehow condensed into silk and thread. And there was the wedding dress, reproduced as a limited edition piece that sold out in 3 days. Every piece sold came with a note from Imani. This dress was made with intention. It was made by hands that understand that clothes are more than fabric. They're promises we make to ourselves and to the world about who we are and what we believe in. Wear this dress knowing that you are part of a story about waiting and creating, and finding your way back to the people who matter. With love and intention. Imani. In the Seoul showroom of Threads of Home, which opened the same year she married Joon, there was a special exhibit. It was a recreation of the Seoul International School art room. All of Imani's original sketches from when she was 13 were displayed on the walls. And in the center of the exhibit, on a white pedestal, sat the original sewing needle case, with a placard that read, "For hands that create. Given by someone who believed in you before you believed in yourself." This case has witnessed 10 years of beautiful things. It has been carried across oceans and through decades of change. And it sits here as proof that some promises are real. Some people actually do wait. Some love actually does last forever. Every single person who visited that exhibit cried. Because it wasn't just about one couple's love story. It was about the universal human need to be seen, to be chosen, to be believed in so completely that someone would spend a decade building themselves into someone worthy of you. That's what made it viral eventually. When Imani's story, their story, became public, the internet couldn't get enough of it. A girl who designed beautiful things while waiting for a boy. A boy who built an empire because he promised to come back. A reunion that happened not in a dramatic moment but in a quiet boutique, when a dress caught the light just right. It was romantic. It was real. It was proof that the best love stories aren't found in movies or novels. They're lived by ordinary people who make extraordinary promises, and then spend years making sure those promises mean something. If this story has touched your heart, If you believe in promises and second chances and beautiful things created with intention, subscribe to this channel right now, because we have more stories like this coming. More stories about people who wait, people who create, people who choose each other again and again every single day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in love that lasts. And thank you for reminding us all that some promises are worth the wait.